Today, my guest you've seen across WWE, WCW, ECW, TNA Wrestling, the one, the only, Mr. Johnny Swinger. Johnny, how are you, sir?
Never better. Thanks for having me on, Big Daddy.
So let me ask you, where did professional wrestling first come into your life? What made you want to get into this crazy industry?
Man, I'm an old guy, so that's a long story. But yeah, it goes all the way back to when I was a kid, like a lot of people. Just came across it on TV when I was probably about 8 or 9 years old. And when I saw it in person the first time, that's when I knew I wasn't a fan. I wanted to do it, right away.
Hmm.
So
Where did you train at? Was it hard to find a school?
I broke in Toronto, Canada, because I was living in Buffalo, New York at the time. And back then, in the early 90s, there weren't a lot of what they call wrestling schools now. There were a few training camps, but most of them are pretty spaced out around the country. Like I talked to Malenkos, but they were all the way down in Florida. Dino Bravo, before he passed away, was training some guys in Montreal, and Ray Stevens out in Minneapolis, but there weren't that many at the time. And Toronto had Sweet Daddy Siki, Ron Hutchison, which would allow me to stay local and live off my mother's couch, while I was training, save me a lot of money. So I ended up there.
What was your first impressions of getting into professional wrestling? Was it harder than what you thought?
Well, the physicality of it was because I actually was involved in the business quite a bit before, with setting up the ring and all that, and being around it, but not ever actually being able. You weren't allowed to get inside of the ring if you weren't a trained professional back then. And if what you mean is when I finally started training and taking the bump, so to speak, yeah, I knew it wasn't a trampoline or anything, but it was a lot harder than I thought it was. And then I found out years later that the training that we went through, myself, Edge, Christian, Joe Legend, Trish Stratus, we all came out of that camp. It was grueling training. We just thought that that's the way it was, but it was up there with the Hearts Dungeon and that type of training. So I was trained to be a professional. So that's the way I looked at it.
When you finished your training, did you stay in one general area for a while, and when did you start to branch out and get your name out there?
No, because in 93, 94, when I started up there wasn't a lot of independent wrestling. I maybe did some shows around Toronto and throughout Ontario. I actually got started in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but there wasn't a lot where you could wrestle every week. And luckily for me, I got noticed pretty quick and was offered a chance to do TV with WCW, and they took a liking to me, and that's how I ended up moving to Atlanta because everything was based out of Atlanta, the old power plant and just all the offices and everything. I
Hmm.
still reside there today.
I was going to ask you that. During your time with WCW, were you a power plant regular? Did you go down there and train?
I did. What was cool about that is, as I said, I was already trained and I was already wrestling for a couple years and wrestling for WCW on television. So when I got signed in '97 to a contract, J.J. Dillon gave his exact words were the power plant is at your disposal. And I was 21 years old, so I wanted to be in the ring every day anyway. So it was the greatest job in the world, the greatest break I ever got. Being paid a guaranteed amount of money every week and getting to be in the ring every day, even if it wasn't TV, I was down there in that power plant working out.
Was it as brutal as everyone said it was?
For the guys that were being trained to be wrestlers, yes, it was. Once again, because I was a full-time contracted talent, I didn't have to do
Hmm.
anything, and it was a big joke with Sarge, Buddy Lee Parker, and them, who's a great friend. And but he knew I didn't have to do anything. I wasn't one of the trainees, but I would get in there once in a while just to see, some new guys that would come in, kind of test their mettle a little bit. I was in there when Goldberg came in the first time. I was in there, when the Big Show was just starting out, had never been seen before. So I got a sneak preview of a lot of guys. Ernest the Cat Miller went on to become really big stars from originating there in the power plant.
Who were the trainers at the time? Because developmental wasn't really a talked about thing back in
Right.
those days.
Like I said, Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker, he was the main trainer, but Jody Hamilton was always around. He was just a wealth of experience and knowledge as one of the assassins. And then Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff would pop in there, Terry Taylor, just a who's who of legends of the sport that I grew up as a kid idolizing, and they were right there for you to just, ask them, or you didn't have to ask them, they tell you, if you did something, they tell you if you did it wrong and how to do it right. So it was a really good advantage that I had back then with that.
How was your time in WCW?
It was great. It really was. It's like anything else. You don't realize how good something is until you don't have it anymore. And then as time goes by, you're like, wow. And even to this day, man, the deal that I had in WCW in the late 90s, if I had it right now, that would be considered a good deal. So it was great. It was a lot of fun. It was my big break as far as TV, and I appreciate getting that opportunity. And Eric Bischoff didn't have to sign me; he could have just kept paying me $200 a night to get crushed. But he made me a full roster member, and man, I had a great time. I wish it was still going today. Me and Buff and Lex Luger and the Steiners, we all still talk about it, how great of a gig we all had. Those guys way more financially than I did, but like I said, I think about it all the time. If I had my WCW guarantee right now, I'd be doing pretty darn good still.
So, what led to ECW?
Um, a few things. Probably that third year of being under contract, you could tell it was hard to break
Mm-hmm.
through with the NWO and Sting and all the New Japan, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero. It was so hard for a guy like me to break through. We had 180 wrestlers under contract, and I got some advice from DDP and a few other people. Maybe you should try to go somewhere else and increase your exposure, and you can always come back and for a better deal. So that's how that came about. My friendship with Raven, he facilitated me going to ECW, and surprisingly, it worked. I didn't think it would because it just wasn't my style
Mm-hmm.
of work. But because I came off the WCW TV as what you'd consider like a traditional wrestler, that was my gimmick in ECW. Everybody else is with garbage cans and chairs and tables, and I didn't do any of that stuff. I was the WCW TV wrestler, and I was a heel because of that. So I had instant reactions right away, and getting put with Simon Diamond was a stroke of luck. You know what I mean? It just happened one night, and we worked well together. And Paulie liked it, and Dreamer liked it, and they ran with it for a good amount of time.
How was it performing in front of those crowds?
Different, like I said, WCW was actually a lot of kids.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly enough, when they weren't giving you the finger or shouting obscenities at you like ECW fans were. And I remember one night I'm wrestling at that ECW arena in Philly, and we're talking about the match, and Dreamer says, "Oh yeah, we're gonna spill out into the crowd." I'm like, "I'm not going out into this crowd. These people, who knows what they got?" He goes, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll protect you." So it was complete. It was a different product, and I think that's why it sold. Not sold out, but sold like made money
Mm-hmm.
because it was different than what WCW and what WWF was airing at the time. It was a real alternative product and stuff that had never violence that had never been seen before on national TV.
Now, after ECW, you went back to WCW for a brief time.
That was that period where ECW stopped running
Mm-hmm.
shows, but we were never officially closed down. There was never a farewell on that. And we did the last ECW pay per view in January of 2001. And 4 or 5 weeks after that, without working, and I wasn't getting paid to not work, I was
Mm-hmm.
only getting paid if I wrestled, like most of the people there. And Johnny Ace, Johnny Laurinaitis, was running the Nitro WCW at the time, and I was still friends with Terry Taylor, and they asked me about coming in to do a cruiserweight tag team tournament, possibly getting my old, a job back, which would have been great. And then by the time I did that, that's when Vince just bought everything all at that same time. So that was a hard time for me and a lot of people because there were no options there for a
Mm-hmm.
short period of time there.
Did you try to go to WWE right after or try out for them?
Well, when the right after I was actually in Cleveland for Raw for a dark match the night of the simulcast when they were on, and had no idea because the internet wasn't that big. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
know. we knew when Shane McMahon popped up on the monitor, and I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be hard to get a job on this, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, that was rough. And then I did whoever I wrestled that night. I don't remember. It was I think we were in Boston or something for WWF at the time, and then I went home at 26 years old, going, man, what do I do now? They own the WCW, and then I think Paulie may have showed up on Raw by that point doing announcing, so we knew that thing was over.
Hmm.
So I was scrounging up any independence I could, and based on my exposure and being known from WCW and ECW, and got some international trips with a group called WWA, World Wrestling All Stars, which if you're familiar with that, they had some, Sting and
Hmm.
Lex, and even Bret Hart did some of those. So then Jimmy Hart came out with the XWF with Hogan, and I was a part of that, but that didn't make it either. So it was a rough time until TNA popped up in 2002.
How did you get on WWE's radar?
Well, that didn't come until after I had the run on
Hmm.
TNA. So 2003, me and Simon went to TNA and had a good run there with the tag team titles and featured real good. And then just like what I tell the guys, the young guys, every good run in wrestling eventually comes to an end or slows down unless you're at the really. I wasn't at the top level. I was in the middle of the road kind of guy, and a few booking changes here or there, and next thing you know, you're not figured in anymore. And uh, my old friend Tommy Dreamer from ECW, he was involved with the WWE at the time, and they were starting up the new developmental in Georgia, where I was living already anyway. So that's how I ended up leaving TNA in 2005, and Dreamer got me signed, and it was kind of like, well, they didn't know what it was at the time. I was
Hmm.
just like, man, I'll sign anything, you know what I mean? Which ended up being a mistake in retrospect. But what wrestler out there even today is going to turn down any kind of a
Hmm.
piece of paper with the WWE logo on it? Nobody. Um, but that's what I did, and that's how I ended up in there. And then, yeah, Deep South hadn't even started yet; they were just talking about it. So I had a good 2 or 3 months under contract where I was just getting paid to sit at home. But I know that kind of stuff doesn't last.
Hmm.
And still a young guy. I wanted to be featured so I could make the really big money.
Hmm.
And then the Deep South opened up, and I got the call, but there was talk about reviving the original ECW back then, and I was told that I'd be a part of that. So just go to this Deep South thing just to stay
Hmm.
warm and keep you warm. And we'll call you up. You'll do really well financially being on the road full time.
It's crazy they didn't offer to send you or other people to OVW or somewhere while they were getting Deep South put together.
Right. I think they were packed with talent too. I
Hmm.
think that was a time where there was just so much talent they didn't know what to do with it, and that's why they opened another developmental, just because they started that with 30 people. But once again, I was in a different situation at that time. I walked into the first day. I never met or heard of any of these guys. There was
Hmm.
30 other people there, and a lot of those guys went on to do really well, become big stars like The Miz and MVP, and Mike Knox is a heck of a talent. He's with NWA now, and the great Khali came in there towards the end. Kofi Kingston, a lot of people. But if you notice, all those names I mentioned, they were all complete unknowns before they went to that Deep South. Whereas I was like, it hurt me, and I hate to say it killed my career, but it did a lot of damage because I had all this momentum from all this TV we just talked about,
Hmm.
and now I basically hadn't been seen for a year and a half. Nobody knew I was in this Deep South wrestling school. You know what I mean? So that's how I ended up. I had to leave that. I was at a point where I was going to quit the whole darn thing because I couldn't go back and do all that stuff again.
Hmm.
You know, so if you're out of sight, out of mind in this profession. You're just like an actor. If you don't do a movie for a few years, they forget about you.
Hmm.
Unless you're Bruce Willis or some really big A-list guy, but not if you're just a hard worker like me. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, I know Swinger, man, he does great, but I'm not main eventing the WrestleMania, and that's who they think about. That if
Hmm.
if you're not in that upper echelon and you're out of a role for a while, you're going to be out of a role for a long time, and you may never get another one.
I almost feel like they just thought, oh, he's happy he's in Deep South, he's got a contract. we'll just do whatever. But I understand where you're
I'll tell
coming
you
from.
I'll tell you exactly what it was, because that Dreamer told me after the fact, because he was in the office. Uh, they saw me as what I was, someone with a lot of experience wrestling TV matches. And if you think about it, I could go in the ring with all these guys that they signed that had no experience and help them and teach them. And I would have been fine with that. I would have been fine with being an NFL coach, but I'm not going to get paid what the water boy gets.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, if I'm going to help you create $1 million stars, you could take care of me,
Yep.
you know what I mean, a little better than what I would make working for Home Depot. And I'm being 100% serious. I won't tell you the figures, but that's what they were. I'm not complaining about only making $275,000. I'm talking like, I could go do anything and make more than this and not have to be in a wrestling school every day. So that's how I ended up just leaving that too. So personally, that was a bust for me. If I could go back and take it back, I'd have never left TNA. I'd have just stuck it out until the booking changed, which it did pretty quickly. Dusty was only booking in there for 6 months, so, but I wasn't getting paid, and I had a wife and a kid, and I'd already been making a living as a wrestler for 10 years, so I was like, okay, I can't sit around and wait. So
Hmm. Doing what you did in Deep South, was it just something where you were just going through the motions because you had been on TV many years prior to
right.
this?
Well, like I said, I was a guy that met the Miz, and they're like, they like this guy. He's from the real world. He's already known, and he's got an annoying quality about him that we think we can draw money with him as a heel. They'd like me to go in the ring with him and just make him look like a wrestler. And I was good at that. I did that in WCW for Ernest Miller, Goldberg, and all these. I wrestled Steve McMichael. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
I think they knew that I was talented enough that, yeah, we could make Swinger into a star, or we could use him to make get give dozens of guys experience. So that, from a business standpoint, I can see where they'd look at that and go, well, we can use this guy to make a whole bunch of money with a whole bunch of other people, and we can come up with something for him at some point, or we don't have to. Which, like I said, I would have been fine with, but the pay just didn't go along with that. I was being paid like a trainee, and I'm like, well,
Hmm.
this is not good for my life.
Hmm.
This doesn't do anything for me.
How was it working with the trainers down in Deep South?
A little. Bill DeMott was the head trainer, and which is funny about that, I knew Bill from WCW as one of the guys in the dressing room who was a little bit more experienced than me, but not much. I wrestled Hugh Morris on television in WCW. I trusted him enough to lay in the middle of the ring when he's 350-pound plus climbed up to the top rope and did a backflip on me, something I wouldn't do today. So we were, I wouldn't say friends, but very friendly. But several years later, when this Deep South thing came up, he almost acted like he didn't know me or anything. And I'm like, he's treating me like, hey, he's writing reports to the office that I wasn't doing my squats or anything. And I'm like, Bill, I was good enough to make you look good on TV 7 years ago, but now I got to do the arm drag takeovers again. Yeah, the whole
Hmm.
thing was just it. I'm not burying that. Should not have been there. They
Hmm.
should have not signed me to go there. They just say, hey, we're going to pass on this guy or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I said, a lot of people benefited from being there. I wasn't cut out for that at that point in my life.
Were there other coaches there during that time, or was it just Bill?
Towards the end, before I left, Dave Taylor, Squire Dave Taylor, came in, who once again was another friend of mine from WCW, and he is actually one of the reasons I stuck it out a little longer, because we would talk off to the side, and we were kind of on the same page with stuff, going, why take these guys and beat the heck out of them for 3 hours? And I mentioned Mike Knox earlier. I'm just going to throw this out there. That was a guy at that time they could have made a lot of money with on TV. He was a big, strong, tough looking guy that could really move, and they beat him to death in these workout sessions. He had a bad shoulder on him by the time he ever got to TV. And if you remember, he didn't do a whole lot of TV because he was already so injured. And that's what we would talk about, that they're just killing these guys before you could ever, like I said, the Miz squeezed out of there, MVP. But Mike Knox, the Russian guy, Vladimir Kozlov, they could have made a ton of money with him, and he was only on there for a year or two. So for the amount of people that went through there and did well, there's a dozen more that they could have made money with and screwed it up by just beating them up, training wise, having them train like they're, just got in the thing 6 weeks ago. You know what I mean?
You did some dark matches during your time in Deep South, right?
I was actually doing some TV matches because I couldn't stand being there anymore. I called Dreamer or somebody off. I said, "Can you guys at least send me to TV and I'll do some pre-show matches?" Because the contract I was on, you'd get paid extra. So my guarantee was very small, so it would get me paid. And then get me at TV where these writers could see me. Oh man, Swinger, we didn't even know you were here. Because I heard these writers were all ECW fans and all that, but I didn't think they knew I was there. They changed my name and everything to Johnny Parisi, and it's like I didn't exist before I got there. But they didn't do anything, so they just left me as a guy that didn't exist. So I went to TV for about 3-4 months, and I had some decent TV matches because that's what I was good at, having TV matches, but they weren't like, none of it led to anything. It was just to get me out of that training center and to make me some extra money. And I stuck that out. I ended up with a little knee injury, and they forced me to go get my knee scoped if I was involved with something, I could have let it go, but I went and got it. And then I never got brought back to TV. And Johnny Laurinaitis says, well, you just got to keep going to the school every day until we come up with something for you. I said, yeah, that doesn't work for me, brother.
Now, were you pitching stuff to them during this whole time? And
yeah. You like that, huh? They came down, they asked the guys to send in ideas. Well, I'll tell you from my experience with that is, they're asking us to book for free, pretty much. They take ideas because anyone in wrestling that got, to the TV level, they got ideas. So take advantage of it. Yeah, they take ideas and they give them to somebody else. Yeah. And I won't go into detail, but I pitched a couple things, and one of them they went with someone else and pushed it real big. But I don't have time to go into it now. But yeah. That's a scam too. Yeah, they got a whole team of Hollywood writers for that. I got a pitch, and they got Michael Hayes back there, who was born in the business and has 1,000 ideas every day, but they want ideas from me, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
That's a common theme with everybody that I've interviewed from Developmental is they come down, you pitch it, and then he would get it or she would get it, and then they're just gone.
Right.
But not for you. It wasn't for you.
Well, I'm telling you, 20 years ago, so they're still doing that. Yeah, don't fall for that crap. Yeah.
Now, when it came time...
Hey, do you mind writing a screenplay? Would you write a screenplay for me? I'll send it in, and I'll get me a movie out of it. Yeah. You don't mind.
I'll let you know if they pick it up.
Yeah.
When your release came, was that you requested it, or they let you go, or how did that conversation go? Did they put up a fight, or did they just like...
Yes, here's what you can say put this on your podcast. I'm the biggest quitter that you've ever interviewed because, yes, I asked for release from every place that we just talked about, including there, because I was taught the old school way by the old timers. When your time is done, your time is done. You don't sit there and keep. So for the WWE scenario, after 18 months of being told, oh, we're trying to think of something, you're not thinking of nothing. This is going to stay what it is. There's no point in me staying. It's time to leave. And yes, I asked for release, and they're a little hesitant about it, but they wouldn't go. We'll increase your pay. Mm-hmm. We'll put you on the road a little more so you can make a living for your family. Nothing like that. And then finally, when the release came, I got paid out the 90 days like everybody else does, and I was on my way.
There's a lot of people I've talked to that they just don't want to be paid to sit at home or to not put in, do what they could do, and so that
never lasts anyway. Even if you're talking about a lot of, actually, the more money you make to sit home and do nothing, mm-hmm. the more chance it's going to end at any day of the week. You know what I mean? So it's just not what we get in it for.
Exactly, and I think a lot of
you got to be involved at that level, or you're just, like I said, when I left, I was worth less than before I went in. I don't know how many people can say they went to the WWF or WWE and came out less valuable because Jeff Jarrett wouldn't touch me after that. I asked to go back to TNA. he wouldn't even talk to me. I had lost value by going to the WWE. I don't know how many people can say that, but unfortunately, I have a dubious distinction of that. Um, and I was about done with it at that point, but I got involved in the independent scene in the South, and it ended up being pretty good for me, and I just stuck with it and kept mainly because I love doing it. But once you do something so long, everything we just talked about, I'm all the way in this thing. I got so much, equity and all that. It's like, well, so what do I do? Give this up and go do something else? If I wasn't getting any work at all, then I would have had to. But I started getting booked pretty regularly every week after that WWE run, and it wasn't from that. It was from, oh man, it's Swinger from ECW. Oh, so more people knew me from ECW and TNA than WCW so far back that they don't remember, because everything was, like I said, NWO, Sting, and Buff, and all those guys. That's the known cast. Whereas I was a hard earner. ECW, gritty, TNA, you know what I mean? And then this recent run at TNA from 2019, when I went back in there, I mean, I don't think anyone expected me to go back on, but that was another lucky break. And man, work-wise, it was the most fun I ever had. I wish the money would have correlated with it, but it's all a timing thing. And like I said, it's show business, and man, you either want to do it or you don't. You know what I mean? And if I didn't want to do it, I would have quit a long time ago. So there's still a part of me that still wanted to do it, still wants to do it. And I still like going to the independent shows to this day. I do personal appearances, signings, these WrestleCades and all that. I'm fortunate. I'm grateful that I've made it far enough that people would want to book me for that. So I'm grateful for that.
So life after your developmental days has been good.
Yeah. Well, just in particular, I was lucky that someone I worked with in developmental had gotten involved with someone that was running a weekly organization in South Georgia and hired me. Actually gave me a salary that was actually more than what I was making at WWE at the time, and and I was involved with the booking and all that. So I had a pretty good job for a couple of years, and still have. It was during the week, so it was a Thursday night show, and then I had my weekends, and I work most weekends up until this day.
If you had any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be?
Bobby Heenan said, "Put a gun to the roof of your mouth." And I'm just kidding. It's always been a hard business to break into. It really is, like the movies or showbiz. You got to do your part as far as developing your talent and ability, which comes from experience. You can't just do it in 6 months. Do everything you can do. You can go to the gym every day. You can, you know what I mean? Not everybody's a bodybuilder, but if you're a small guy, you got to have some muscles or something, unless you look like Glenn Jacobs, you're 6'9" or whatever. I was 5'9", so 5'10" on my best. And so I had to have shoulders and arms and all this stuff to try, you know what I mean? So do what you can for yourself. The better you look, the better chance someone's going to see you and get you an opportunity. But there's no guarantee. They told me that the first week I signed up for training, and it goes true today. There's no guarantee, but if you really want to do it, stick with it. But you got to do your part and put everything into it. You can't just do it an hour a week or something and go, oh man, when's Endeavor or WWE going to call me and offer me $3 million? It's not going to happen. Just like you're not going to be starring with The Rock in any of these movies. It's just not going to, you got to go out and do the work and do everything you can and hope for the best.
Absolutely. Where can people reach out to you at?
I'm on the social media gimmicks, you know what I mean? I'm on Twitter, or what's it, X now, at Swinger_Johnny. Johnny_Swinger on Instagram, and of course Facebook as Johnny Swinger, and my real name Joe Dorgan. And so I'm easy to find but hard to get.
Do you have any upcoming appearances?
I do, yeah. I'll be wrestling for Rhino. He's got quite the organization going up in Michigan the first weekend of May. He's got a fan fest on the Friday in Monroe, Michigan. Then Saturday he's got matches. Myself, I'm the smallest guy on there. He's got Kurt Angle. I'll just Victoria. She's like a Hall of Famer, right? I mean, he's got, I think RVD's on it, Boogeyman. Geez, my old nemesis, the Brooklyn Brawler, is going to be there. He's got quite, if you check it out, the Insane Wrestling Revolution it's called. And that's May 2nd and 3rd up in Michigan. I'm part of Scott D'Amore's Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, where we run in Toronto's Maple Leaf Gardens the following weekend, May 10th. He's got a big pay-per-view going on there. So I'm still involved at the TV level, and I do independent shows all across the country, a lot here in the South and Georgia and Alabama, and having a bad connection here. I thought maybe they're cutting us off.
No, sorry.
I can hear you.
Well, I just want to say thank you for taking
That's all right.
Go ahead. Good?
Oh, my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on. We'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling and what you continue to do, sir. It's been an honor.
Same here. Same here. Good luck with the podcast, man.
Thank you. And if there's ever anything that I can do, please feel free to reach out.
Appreciate you, man. Have a good one, brother.
Thank you.